Alright, welcome back to another review. So, as you may recall from the previous video of this particular series, I just bought the AudioTechnica M50x-BT2s, which are basically the legendary M50Xs, but with very capable Bluetooth componentry added to it in case you want to use them wirelessly. Now, I've owned the M40X for quite a few years now, and I've been using them as my, isolation headphones for playing the electric cello, editing some YouTube videos from time to time, though I use my 600s mainly for that, and as my travel headphones for whenever I go out of town. So now the time has come to ask, are the M50Xs really that much better than the M40Xs? Let's find out. So let's go ahead and start off with the contents. AudioTechnica really sets you up with stuff right out of the box. No major differences between these two, except for the types of cables included. So the M40Xs will include a much longer twist and lock 2.5mm to 3.5mm cable with a 3.5mm to 1/4 inch screw-on adapter, which is more ideal for studio use. Very, very long cable. And it will also include a coiled cable if you're, if you're into that sort of thing. Though at this point I basically have no idea where I left mine, but now the M50x-BT2 will include a much shorter and thinner, I want to say more flexible, 3.5mm to L-shaped 3.5mm cable. So this kind of length is, it's ideal for travel if that's your intention, but not really for studio use. You'll have to look into getting some other 3.5 cable for that. Now I will mention, when buying a replacement 3.5mm cable for your M50Xs, make sure that they've got a very narrow base, or they simply just won't fit into the M50X's port. It's not a proprietary connector per se, it's a very narrow one. Make sure it's not that wide. Now, of course, because the M50x-BT2s are Bluetooth headphones, they will also include a short USB-A to USB-C cable for charging. Now let's go ahead and talk about the build quality. Not a lot of differences here besides minor aesthetic ones, like their cups design. The M50Xs do have the ability to spin outwards and inwards, unlike the M40Xs that can only spin outwards. See? Mind you, this is left, this is right. They can spin outwards, not inwards. Besides that, both of them can be inverted and folded up like this for travel purposes. The M50Xs have slightly thicker padding up top, even though it can't really be seen on camera. Well, it can be seen just a little bit. It's slightly noticeable, but you can tell right there. Now these also feature 45mm drivers as opposed to the M40X's 40mm drivers. So it's barely going to be noticeable, but the cups on the M50Xs are just slightly bigger than these. Let's discuss the comfort here. The M50X's Bluetooth, I'm just going to call these the 50s. The 50s cups are a tad bit heavier since they do have the additional Bluetooth componentry in here. It's nothing major though, it really doesn't affect anything comfort-wise. The M50Xs feel like they're designed for larger heads. For my larger dome, while using a cap, mind you, I have to max out the extension on the M40X's headband. It'll fit, but just barely. The M50Xs will still have an extra 4 notches left for me in case I want to extend it even more. That said, I don't feel like the cups are noticeably larger, but for some reason, I find the M50Xs much more comfortable to wear. They sit around my ears a tad bit better, and the pads themselves just feel a tad more plush with an extra bit of give. They may look the same, but the M40X's pads kind of feel a little stiffer compared to the M50X's. Now let's discuss some amplification. So I run these at the exact same volume. On my THX AAA 789, I'll run them at around 11:30 AM on gain 1. On my iPhone 13 Pro via Lightning dongle, I'll run these at around 9 to 10 out of 16. Now, let's go ahead and discuss the sound. So I'm going to go ahead and preface this entire portion with the fact that because we want to be as fair as possible here, and because whoever is watching this video will most likely be somebody who is primarily looking for a mixing headphone to use via wired connection, I'll be performing this comparison using wired mode only. If you want more information on how these sound via Bluetooth, check out the individual review of these that I put on my channel right here. Now, let's not waste any more time. Let's dig right into it. Starting off with the bass. Right off the bat, I did notice the M40Xs possess a much more bloated, meatier bass than the M50Xs. This definitely travels up to the mid-bass and upper bass portions. Now the M50Xs offer the deeper sub-bass extension of the two. Given their 45mm drivers versus 40, that makes sense. This definitely adds to the enjoyment factor in electronic bass tracks like Alive, the Z remix by Empire of the Sun. While both of these headphones are a bit of a heavy hitter with slam delivery, the M50Xs focus on a range closer to the sub-bass region of things, whereas the M40 focus on a region closer to the mid-bass portion. Neither of these really impress me when it comes to bass guitars. Both headphones have a signature that just kind of bloats the bass guitar a bit too much for my taste. This also makes them sound a bit woolier than I'd prefer. That said, the M50X do this a little bit less since they are a bit less emphasized in the mid-bass than the M40Xs. So yeah, that mid-bass region between 100 to 180 Hz is definitely a weak spot for both of these. There's just a bit too much warmth for tracks like The Hammer by Deathclock, where this part of the frequency is already emphasized. That said, the M50Xs do have a bit more control here, and it's much less of a meaty mess than the M40Xs. Kick drums. The M40X present kick drums in a much more tubey and thick manner, while the M50Xs present them in a leaner but punchier and clearer manner. Overall, I definitely have to give the bass section to the M50Xs. They're much more controlled, much closer to being accurate, and much better quality if you ask me. Now let's go ahead and tackle the mids. The M50Xs present female vocals in a more forward manner than the M40Xs do, being closer to neutral in that regard. The slight trade-off here is that the M50Xs make them sound slightly less full as well. So my go-to example for this is going to be Dream On, the Postmodern Jukebox cover, always. Female vocals are supposed to stand out here and be a bit like in your face, to the point of sometimes being a bit too much. The M50Xs get them there, while I never faced this with the M40Xs. Now I know that sounds like a good thing, and if you'd rather the vocals take a back seat compared to the rest of the instruments, well, I suppose it is a good thing. But it's definitely not neutral. Now instruments within the cello's range will sound a bit more full to my ears and accurate on the M40Xs than on the M50Xs. However, the trade-off is that the M50Xs will present a little extra bit of detail compared to the M40s. Those plucks, you know, the twang from the pizzicato, the friction of the bow on the strings, all of this can be heard a tad better on the M50Xs. Same goes for brass instruments here. The M50Xs bring them forward quite a bit more and possess a little extra bit of detail when it comes to that like honkiness that brass instruments have. This definitely sounds a lot more accurate to real life than the M40Xs. So overall, the M50Xs managed to bring the mids a bit more forward and in line with the bass and treble responses than the M40Xs. I generally do believe the sound benefits from this balance, and as a neutral but fun advocate, I'm all for it. Now let's discuss the treble response a bit. The M50Xs are just slightly more sibilant than the M40Xs. Both of them definitely have that extra little sharpness in the consonant region though, so don't think you'll escape this if you get the M40Xs. Now the M50Xs definitely possess a slightly more forward treble than the M40Xs. They sound a bit airier and they have a bit more of a metallic twang to them. I will say that while the M50Xs do bring forth the airiness a bit more, this doesn't mean the M40Xs aren't airy. They just keep it a bit more, distant by comparison. Even in Thunder Horse by Deathclock, that coin rubbing sound you hear across the entire track sounds duller and less pronounced on the M40Xs and can easily be overlooked here, while the M50Xs won't really allow that. Now cymbals and hi-hats are also more forward on the M50Xs, sounding a bit closer to real life too. One thing you'll notice regarding this is that because of it, the M50Xs will give them a lot more definition and texture. Now let's discuss the soundstage and the imaging. So both of these being closed backs, don't expect any sort of magical soundstage coming from these. If anything, the M40Xs possess the slightly wider soundstage, but not by much. Both of these will be pretty narrow. As for imaging, there is a bit of an improvement on the M50Xs, but it really isn't drastic. I was able to track sounds going from left to right, back and forth a little more easily with the M50Xs. Either way, both of these do a pretty good job of it for the price. Now let's jump into the notes and observations portion here. Once again, I did perform this review with the M50Xs in wired mode, just because it'd be a bit more of a fair comparison to the wired M40X. And again, most people watching this review would be trying to decide which of them might be best for wired monitoring and mixing capabilities. So to conclude here, I can't believe how much time I wasted thinking the M50Xs were inferior to the M40Xs. Like, this is simply just far from the truth. The M50Xs offer a more neutral tuning with even better detail and imaging than the M40Xs. And to top it all off, the M50x-BT2 can be used via Bluetooth too. No pun intended. If your budget allows it, I definitely recommend the M50Xs over the M40Xs. However, if it just so happens that the signature you're looking for matches what I said about the M40Xs, I doubt you'll regret getting them either. They're still a fantastic pair of headphones that can be found on sale for like $80 to $100 pretty often. So yeah, that's going to conclude my thoughts on the matter here. I am definitely going to be keeping the M50Xs and getting rid of the M40Xs. You know, thanks for the years, but you won't be needed anymore. I'll be using these. Anyways, thank you very much for watching. I hope this helped you in some way, shape, or form, and I will see you in the next video. Okay, ciao.